So I'm queer, I'm gender non-binary. When I was in high school, I was like the straight ally president of the Gay Straight Alliance at my school. And I remember fighting my parents to be allowed to take the bus into the city to go to some of the protests against Prop 8.
That was Street Sheet editor Quiver Watts. I'm Jeff, and this is Storied San Francisco. Every week on this podcast, you'll hear from journalists, activists, artists, and San Franciscans from all walks of life, telling stories, sharing personal histories, and trying to put into words what makes this city so special. Welcome to episode 45, part 1. This is a special episode that we recorded back in June at the San Francisco Cultural History Museum's pop-up event, Streets of San Francisco. The CHM asked us to host a panel with Street Sheet editors Quiver Watts and TJ Johnston. This podcast is the talk we had with the two editors that day. Here are Quiver and TJ.
So if you all haven't listened to the podcast before, one of the things I like to do is kind of talk about, I guess the bigger question is, why are we here? How did we come here? Some of us are born here, lucky enough to be born here, born and raised. But a lot of us are also transplants.
Which would describe me. I came here from Massachusetts like almost 25 years ago, this coming month.
Okay, we'll talk about that. Do you want to take the lead on that? Because I want to hear more in depth of maybe a little bit about your life before you moved here, and then what was it about San Francisco that brought you out here?
Well, I guess the Reader's Digest version is that I just wanted to leave Massachusetts, head over to California. So happened I had a friend who was staying here. So I moved out here back in 1994.
Did it have anything to do with the winters in Massachusetts versus?
A lot of it, yes.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah. What did you like? What were your impressions of the city? Had you visited before you came here or anything like that?
I went here for an exploratory visit, January of '94, and I thought, okay, I think I'm gonna make the splash, and I moved in July later that year.
Okay, what was the city like? What was it that captured your heart and made you move literally across the country?
Okay, well, I lived mostly in small towns, and San Francisco was bigger than them, and I just, the whole cultural scene in San Francisco was what attracted me here.
Cool. What were some of the first places that you either lived or restaurants you ate at, clubs you what did you do when you got here? What kind of things neighborhoods were you hanging out in?
Okay, well, I lived mostly in the Lower Haight when I moved out here, and from there, pretty much was staying in the Lower Haight for maybe about 17 years until I had to leave.
You're holding a mic, so you can't do air quotes, but I think that was leave.
But I could do with enough vocal inflection. So.
Yes, vocal air quotes. Okay, Quiver, do you want to talk to that topic of? I'm not sure because we're just meeting for the second-ish time, but Are you from the area?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I grew up in Petaluma, which is about 40 minutes north from here. And I grew up coming into San Francisco because my mom worked for the SF Chronicle for 25 years. So I would come in with her to go to work some days for take your kid to work day.
At Fifth and Mission?
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, she worked for the Examiner, and then when it was bought out by the Chronicle, she worked for the Chronicle.
Got it.
Yeah, and I moved to Berkeley and then Oakland in 2010 for college, and have stayed in Oakland since then, and have been working in San Francisco for the last 4 years.
Okay. Well, as a kid, what ages are we talking? Young, super young?
Yeah, I mean, she was working there my whole life, so probably my first experiences in San Francisco were being 4 years old and going to Pier 39. I remember, Laughing Sal in the Musée Mécanique, and I remember going to the Exploratorium back when it was at the other location, not down at the Embarcadero. And yeah, I remember going to the San Francisco Zoo with some reporters, and we were all writing a story for the Examiner. Not really, but we got to go backstage with the koalas and stuff. Pretty exciting.
Yeah.
Those are my early memories of San Francisco.
I would think growing up, I say like just up the road, Petaluma's wonderful. I love that place.
Yeah.
But before you actually moved down to the Bay Area, like what were your impressions of? Was it just like this shining metropolis, or what was it?
Well, so I'm queer, I'm gender non-binary. When I was in high school, I was like the straight ally president of the Gay Straight Alliance at my school. And I remember fighting my parents to be allowed to take the bus into the city to go to some of the protests against Prop 8, the proposition that banned gay marriage in California initially. And so I think coming into San Francisco for Pride and for the campaign for marriage equality as a burgeoning queer 16-year-old was amazing. It was like the first time that I was surrounded by other queer people, and Petaluma is really close, but it is also there's a lot of homophobia in that area. So I mean, as everywhere, but
yeah. And I'm not going to shit on Petaluma. I love it, but it's more America
than
it is here. I go there frequently, I'd say, but it's like, oh, there's a Trump sticker.
Yeah, definitely. I remember having setting up Gay Straight Pride or Gay Straight Alliance tables at my high school, and having kids come and steal the Skittles and throw them at us and yell faggot at us and that sort of thing. So coming to San Francisco and being at a protest surrounded by drag queens and by other queer people, I was just like, oh my God, where am I?
Right. Yeah. Okay, so you made the move. So I think we've gotten you both here at very different times, and I'd say in the city's history. The city probably looked very different for both of you from when you came here. But you're both here, and now I guess let's talk about your work with Street Sheet. So maybe some personal stories about how you got involved. Either anything, before actually working for Street Sheet, or if you want to go straight into that.
My tenure in Street Sheet pretty much happened, you could say, by accident. An old coworker of mine at the Census Bureau, told me about these free writing classes that at the Media Alliance, and I assumed that by writing they were talking about short stories, prose, nonfiction, poetry. It turned out to be a journalism class. It was being facilitated by Adam Clay Thompson, who was then reporting for the Bay Guardian. And we wound up it was a class of maybe about 6 of us, and we essentially did an investigative piece about nonprofit organizations that serve the homeless population but still pay their executives 6-figure salaries. We call it poverty pimping.
Wow. Is that story available currently for folks to read, or? It
ran in 2001, and no, I don't think it's available online. I think I might actually have a copy of the original in printed format.
I'll put it up on our website. It sounds like, yeah. Were you excited about that? Did you have a background in journalism, or?
Not really. That was my foray into journalism, and from there, I kind of got involved with Street Sheet, with Poor Magazine. Also with Street Spirit in the East Bay, and I wanted to in the meantime I also took journal classes over at City College in San Francisco.
Okay, awesome. So Quiver, what's your story?
So my mom is a writer and an editor, so I grew up with every school paper that I ever tried to write being covered with red pen, crossing out my typos and grammar mistakes.
You're talking to an editor, by the way.
yeah.
But I hear you.
Aren't we all?
Yeah, exactly. Did she wear the green lampshade?
Not quite, actually, but yeah. So I grew up as a writer and somebody with a keen eye for details. Although I really don't measure up to TJ. TJ is an incredible editor. But I got involved with the Coalition on Homelessness after being part of a anti-eviction campaign in Albany, actually at the Albany Bulb, where there were 60 residents who were displaced by the city, despite there being no homeless shelter in town. So. Yeah, I applied to work at the Coalition on Homelessness a few years back and started out doing fundraising. And then when the Street Sheet editor position opened up, I applied and have been doing this for the last 2 years. And it's been the best job I could possibly imagine having.
Where did you get your sense of social justice, do you think? And would you call it that? Am I putting...
Yeah, social justice? Yeah, I mean, I think... I can't remember a time in my life where I haven't been called to social justice causes. And growing up as a queer person, especially in a class-privileged area with a lot of visible poverty very nearby, I think poverty issues in particular have always been important to me, but definitely working with the homeless folks at the Albany Bulb, I learned so much about my own class privilege and internalized bigotry against poverty and poor people. And I think one of the things that I love the most about Street Sheet is that I think a lot of that comes from not really hearing first-person perspectives on what homelessness is, like who homeless people are, and there's a sort of conversation about homelessness that lumps every homeless person together into a category, and really homelessness is just a state that many of us are on the brink of, or could happen to most of us, if not all of us. So I think just getting those perspectives firsthand is really critical for breaking out of that. And that's what Street Sheet tries to do. So I get to read and edit stories and sometimes transcribe stories from people who have become homeless or have been homeless in the past or are currently homeless for a variety of reasons, and get to hear their stories directly from them instead of just from other housed people who are doing their, doing a pretty cursory job.
Yeah. And that's kind of like what attracted me to the Street Sheet as well, is that it's a publication that pretty much, puts a microphone to homeless people and give them their voice and amplifies it. And you really don't see that many publications that offer this soapbox, this platform for people who are like unhoused or who are at risk of losing their housing. So, and it's like it's just something about the conversation of you could use homelessness as an example, but it can apply to any given social issue. Is that the media kind of appoints as experts government officials, bureaucrats, and academics who as the quote-unquote experts, while those who are directly impacted by those issues, whether it's homeless people or people who are kind of living, who are going to be directly impacted by, say, climate change. Those people and those who speak on their behalf are merely quote-unquote advocates. So, and but here at the Street Sheet, we're both advocates and journalists.
That was Quiver Watts and TJ Johnston. Check back Thursday when TJ and Quiver will dive deeper into the advocacy journalism that they and Street Sheet engage in. Music for the podcast is by Otis McDonald. Film photography is by Michelle Kilfeather. You can find all episodes on our website, storiedsf.com. While you're there, please help support what we do by going to our store page and choosing from several different pledge levels. Please follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts, please rate and review the show. And if you have any feedback or potential guests for us, our email is storiedsf@gmail.com. Thanks for listening.